Savani from Hedgecraft Heirlooms, and I am live here today to talk about protection magic, which is one of the most requested, topics that I get for things that people want me to talk about in these live streams. So this week it's all about fan service, so to speak, and giving you guys what you asked for. So we're going to talk about protection magic. Hey Sarah Star, we're here talking about protection magic. Hey Tabitha Chakra Magic, we're going to be talking about protection magic today. I'm just finishing getting myself all set up here, so if you could just hang in there with me for a couple more moments, that would be wonderful. I'm going to actually hit it up in no. I'm trying to get a second tab open of something really quickly. I'm gonna also open up my Etsy shop for later, so I have that in front of me. Alright, and I'm going to hit it up in maximize and turn off the sound. Hello, see. So, as I said, thank you all for being here. I'm all set up now, or at least good enough. Oh, maybe not. One more thing. So while we wait for folks to show up, I thought a fun thing to talk about would be some of my personal favorite tips and tricks for psychic and energetic protection. Magical protection, whatever word you prefer. There is no wrong one necessarily here. So of course, before I mention any of them, it's important to realize that your mileage may vary. Just because there's something that I really like doesn't mean that you're really going to like it. I just want to share with you guys what I thought worked really well. And one of those things is actually on screen right now, true story, and it's this. So the pentacle as a symbol is a protection symbol, and that's actually one of the main reasons why I wear mine all the time, is for protection. Another symbol that I've used personally is a solar cross or a medicine wheel, which is a circle with an equal arm cross inside of it, either wearing it or mounting it on my rear view in my car. I also am really a big fan of the idea of putting brooms over doorways or certain doorways, or next to doorways even. One of the ones that I use regularly is actually a piece of decor that I bought from Michael's from Halloween. And I've just kept it there because I happen to really like it. So it's not even a real broom, but again, magic is all about intention, so it doesn't super matter at all. And of course, you can also just prop a broom up next to a doorway. Generally, you want to put it bristles up. I don't remember why that is. I just know that it is. Another thing you can do is you can put dried herb bundles next to doors. That's a thing that I do. I have a big bundle of dried mint next to one of my doors. That I like. It's nice because I see it there every time I walk in, and it smells nice, and it looks really, really cool because it's dried herbs. Which house would you expect to walk into where there isn't bundles of dried herbs everywhere? So it kind of just fits in. Wearing black or purple. I know you can't really tell, but my pants today do actually have a lot of black in them, and a lot of witchy folks do tend to wear a lot of black. Black is a color of protection because it is believed to absorb negative energy. And I also like purple. Purple I think can also be a good protection color. And then finally I also wrote down bells. Bells which can be either worn on the body, or they can be hung on doorknobs, which is actually the most common way they're used, or even again rear view mirrors, which are really fun. I have a collection of small bells that I've been meaning to turn into. They call them witches' bells when you have a little cluster of bells that are used for protection that you put on a front door. I have a collection that I've been meaning to put together, and I just haven't done it yet, but I love the idea of bells, and the way bells are supposed to work is that the sound is believed to break up stagnant or negative energy in an area, which makes it easier, of course, for it to be gotten rid of. I just realized I didn't have this. So I didn't get to say it yet, but if you're here watching, of course, you can throw a hashtag live into the comments if you're watching on the replay. Hashtag replay, especially if you're on Facebook. I have both happening at the same time, but especially if you're on Facebook, because Facebook doesn't tell me when people come on and what their names are, and the way that Instagram is, and that way I get to say hello. But that said, let us dive into talking about what you all came here for, and that is actual protection magic. Well, not that that stuff wasn't protection magic, of course, but the stuff that I actually have in my outline that's actually intended to be for this little live mini class on protection magic. So, if you are you're experienced in magic, experienced in the metaphysical, experienced in witchcraft. You've probably heard of a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about here today. Um, but I think it's never too late in the process, or you're never too experienced to hear the basics again, or be reminded of how important they can be. So what I really want to talk about today is grounding, centering, and shielding. Now, if you're newish to magic, witchcraft, or any of those things, you might have heard that terminology, but not really known what it meant, not really known how to do it. So I want to talk a little bit more about that today. You know, a lot of these videos that I do are really intended more for the beginner. You know, it's kind of just introductory information that, you know, with the intention that it hopefully inspires you to research and learn more on your own. But this will kind of give you a little bit of groundwork so you can kind of move forward from here to use this information to your benefit for psychic protection. So first of all, let's talk about grounding. You've probably heard that term before. Some people refer to it literally to when you walk on the ground barefoot, which I've actually generally heard called earthing, not grounding, which is how I usually use the terminology, just to keep them separate in my head. But grounding is the act of connecting to the earth, or bringing your energy into your physical body. You know, our culture and our society in general is very cerebral, and we place a lot of value on being up in our heads, up in our thoughts, and not a lot of value of being in our bodies. So a lot of us have a sort of learned behavior of keeping our energy effectively outside or at the outskirts of our physical body in a way, which when you're doing magical work is not particularly effective. You know, so the act of grounding, and I do believe it's called this for this reason, but the act of grounding your energy in your body is much in the same way that people use grounding in electricity. The purpose of which is to create a backup pathway for the electrical or psychic energy. Usually, you know, like if there's a fault or something goes wrong elsewhere, it creates an alternate route for the energy to take, so it won't be damaging. Or it could be in a place for excess or negative energy to flow out of, which I think is certainly very accurate for doing energetic or psychic work. And then also you could think of it sort of like a waste disposal system, you know, to get rid of whatever is left. I don't know if you've ever done a spell or a ritual and at the end felt kind of jittery, you know, a little bit like you were buzzed, and that's actually that's a feeling of not being grounded. That's all the excess energy is just kind of like ricocheting around inside of you and kind of throwing you off a little bit. So grounding is one of the ways you can both prevent that and treat it if that should happen. Like I mentioned earlier, the idea of grounding as walking barefoot is actually a way that you can ground. And then there is also, of course, centering. So unlike grounding, which is just about, it's about connecting to the earth and bringing your energy into your physical body, centering sort of takes that to the next step. And it is the process of aligning your energy body with your physical body. So not just bringing it into the body, but lining it up. To lay right on top of the framework of the energetic body laying in the physical body in the framework and the exact alignment that it is supposed to be for, optimal everything. It's sort of like, it's sort of like a tune-up. When you think about like tuning up a car, you're tightening up the belt, you're realigning the gears and making everything so it lines up just right so it can work as effectively as possible. So that's what centering is for. I don't know if you've ever heard, most of us have, I should say, heard the phrase, being beside oneself with grief, or beside oneself with even happiness or joy or sadness or anything like that. And again, if you're watching, if you want to throw a hashtag live to the comments, hashtag replay if you're watching on the replay, especially if you're on Facebook, so I could say hello, that would be great. But the term beside oneself, I always thought, since I read it in a book, I should say, I've always thought was a really apt explanation for why it's so important to center, is that when we experience extreme emotions or just extreme physical experiences, oftentimes it throws our energy off, because that's just how we naturally cope or deal with certain experiences. But centering is the process of making ourselves not beside oneself or beside ourselves. It's putting everything in line. And that alignment, basically, it's sort of like when you plug a not the best analogy because I'm going to talk a little bit about how we are not batteries, but hang in there with me. Hey, Queen Toadstool, we're here talking about protection magic today. I just talked about grounding, and we're talking a little bit about centering right now. When we are aligned and centered, it's sort of like when you are putting a battery into your remote. Let's say you take the battery and you line up the positive and the negative, or you have it flipped. Let's say if you have it flipped, the energy can't flow through the battery the right way in order for you to actually use it as a power source. Or even if you have it in flipped the right way, but it's just a little bit off kilter and it can't connect. So the act of centering is much like taking a battery in a device and making sure that it's lined up pole to pole, up and down exactly the right way it's supposed to be in order to make all those connections. So that's what centering does, is it allows us to kind of tap into both this negative and positive kind of energy so that we can become a conduit or a place for that energy to flow through. Hey, Thrift School Magic, we're here talking about protection magic today. Thank you for joining us. And except for when you are, almost no exceptions actually, pretty much all the time, if you are doing spell work, if you are doing ritual work, and especially if you're doing healing work, it is really, really important. And a lot of people don't necessarily read this or know this or have been taught this, but you should pretty much almost never be using your own personal energy when you're doing those things. First of all, it's generally not as powerful as the energy that you can channel if you're connected in the proper way. But also, you can deplete yourself really easily if you're always using your own personal energy for your rituals, spells, or healing work. So the idea is that when you are connected by grounding and then centering, it creates like I said, a conduit, or you become a vessel for the energies of the universe to flow through you and allow you to access and channel those energies if you want or need to. And a lot of people, I put this term in here, but I often, this comes from the book Hands of Light, I believe by Barbara Brennan, but she refers to that energy as universal, the energy, the place where we pull that energy from as the universal energy field or universal energy. So that's what you really want to be working with, is that universal energy. And centering allows your body to most effectively connect into those energies. And then finally, of course, the most important thing that we're going to talk about today, because we're talking about protection magic, is shielding. Now, I want to talk about grounding and centering first because, in my opinion and estimation and everything that I've ever learned or been taught, grounding and centering are sort of like, I have a million analogies today apparently, but it's sort of like when you sit in the car and you adjust your mirrors before you start driving. It's sort of like the prep steps before you get into the meat and potatoes of protection magic and shielding work. Because if you aren't lined up and grounded and centered, you're going to have a really hard time creating the psychic barriers or shields that you want to create. So grounding and centering makes that work much more efficient and effective. So shielding specifically is intended to guard against external barrage as opposed to internal. Sort of like wearing a seatbelt. So basically, psychic protection and magical protection is supposed to keep us from being harmed from anything that is outside of ourselves. Now, of course, there are lots of us who are very good at harming ourselves. This won't necessarily help with that. This is, for doing what we can to control external forces. I'm going to take a sip of my drink. And I just dripped it on my paper, which was wonderful. That's what I get for taking a drink with me for once. So, I mentioned the idea of doing energy work, rituals, spells, and healing work. So shielding is a crucially important part of doing any and all of those types of things. But especially, in my opinion, for people who are doing healing work or working within other people's energy fields intentionally, no matter what the context of that happens to be. So some of the ways that you can shield involves taking care of yourself, eating right. Hey, Anchored Soul Therapy, we're here talking about psychic protection and psychic protection magic today. I talked about grounding and centering, and now we're talking about shielding. So some things that you can do involve eating right, taking care of yourself, which sounds like a silly, very mundane thing, but it is very important. Much like we talk about the idea of doing centering and grounding work to help align our energy body and our physical body itself also has its own systems that need to be in alignment, and when they are off kilter, it can throw off the entire system and make things work less effectively. So by eating right and taking care of our bodies, it helps us do all of our work better. Wearing protective colors. I mentioned that a little bit in the pre-show, talking about wearing black is the most common one, also sometimes gold. Some people really align well with or resonate well with white or silver. And of course, almost every color is considered a protection color in some culture and in some belief systems somewhere. So if you have a color that you really connect with, that you think of as a protection color, red, for example, is another one that people might choose. Your mileage may vary. Choose what feels right to you. But black is probably the one that is most commonly associated with protection specifically. Obviously, there are certain protective stones that you can wear. You could, some that are, and I mentioned the idea that black is the most common color associated with protection magic. Likewise, black gemstones are the ones that are the most commonly associated with protection magic as well. Most commonly, black tourmaline, obsidian, and then some others that aren't necessarily black, but also amethyst. I mentioned purple earlier, so amethyst. Also citrine and selenite. Now, kind of an interesting story about citrine and selenite. I know this isn't a crystal magic class, but still relevant to what we're talking about today. Are both stones that are generally believed to not absorb and hold onto negative energy. They are both believed to transmute negative energy. To me, especially selenite. And actually, I forgot to write it on my personal favorite techniques. But one of the other things I really like to do is I have a little piece of tumbled citrine in a lot of the windowsills in my house too, or I put pentacles over my doorways. Like actual wooden pentacles. You've seen some in some of my photographs potentially. I like to use those. But citrine is a really wonderful one as well. Other things you can do are protective symbols or talismans. I talked about my pentacle or pentagram earlier is a protection symbol, which is part of why I like to wear it. And I have a quick note for myself here just to throw this out there so I don't forget, of course, that, physical objects, all these things I'm talking about can be great and helpful and wonderful, but the most important thing in all of this is intention. And there is plenty of protection magic that can be done that requires no things or stuff at all. But I just want to throw some of these ideas out here because most of the time when people ask about protection magic, they want to know about this stuff. But you don't need stuff. We are going to get to that in a second. Let's see. So pentagram, pentacle, an eye of Horus is another one that's used a lot for protection. A hamsa or a nazir. So the hamsa is the hand that often has symbolism inside of it, or the evil eye, the nazir symbol, which is usually blue. You usually see both of those in Eastern, near Far East countries like in India and the Middle East. I love those symbols. I don't know why. Those have always just really captured my imagination and my soul in some kind of way. So I love those. The arrow, the helm of Ah, which is used a lot in heathenism and North paganism. I might be putting my foot in my mouth here, but if I remember correctly, it was specifically discovered in some sort of anthropological context to have been believed to protect sailors in particular. But a lot of people wear it for protection, just generally speaking. Additionally, of course, Thor's hammer, or Mjolnir, is considered to be a protection symbol as well. In fact, some people, Norse pagans and heathens in particular, use the Mjolnir symbol traced in the air in ritual to bless and consecrate their spaces, just like that. Obviously, I'm mirrored to you, but you go down and the left to right, so you're creating the shape of the Mjolnir. And then there's also a Celtic shield knot as another one. Of course, all of those, that is not a comprehensive list. There are tons of protection symbols out there. I just kind of picked out a few particular ones that stood out to me to share with you. And then, of course, I mentioned earlier, there are lots of things that you can do for protection that don't require any kind of stuff, and the most common way to do them is meditation. In fact, all of the things I talked about today, grounding, centering, and shielding, are all things that can be achieved through meditation alone. In fact, a lot of people will stick them together in a single meditation to do it all at once on a regular basis. When you're new and you're fresh to a spiritual practice or magical practice, it could be actually really valuable to do something like that on a daily basis. One of the most, I want to say the most, one of the easiest places to kind of make it a habit to do that is in the shower in the morning. And there's something nice about the symbolism and the feeling of the water kind of cascading over you while you're doing it, the idea of it washing away negative energy. And I do have a meditation that I wrote about this. I do believe I shared part of one in my email this week, actually. So if you're on my VIP list, you already have that in your inbox somewhere. But in this, I have a meditation that I wrote that I just generally use for visualization purposes when I'm doing it on my own, which involves, visualizing being in a forest and becoming a tree and digging my roots into the ground and connecting into the heart of Mother Earth, so that I am grounding in that way and bringing myself down into my body, connecting to the energy of Mother Earth. And then on the flip side, coming back and I'm reaching my branches up into the sky to connect with Father Sky and bringing that energy down and then centering everything all in one place and using that energy to kind of create a shield around myself. And then I didn't make notes about this here, but another thing to think about if you're doing your shielding work through visualization and meditation is like how you might choose to visualize it. The most common way that people talk about doing it is using the idea of white light. There are some people that really dislike the idea of white light because they find it to be almost too effective, that they're keeping out everything, because we can't ever really be completely sure what is positive and what's negative and how you define one or the other. Hey, Secretly Neo, we're here talking about protection magic today. So some people, instead of visualizing their shields as being made of white light, will choose to visualize instead gold light or a mirrored surface or flame. I tend to visualize in that meditation I was describing sort of a little while ago, my shield as being sort of like a two-way mirror. Or is it a one-way mirror? Maybe I'm describing that incorrectly. But I remember, I don't know if any of you see this, they usually have them in like those police interrogation rooms where you have people sitting on one side where they can see into the room, and the folks on the other side only see a mirror. They can't see that there's anybody watching them. So when I'm doing my shielding, I'm imagining my entire shield like that as a 1/2-way mirror so that I can see out, and it is permeable enough to let things that are valuable and helpful to me in, but keep anything out that is negative that I don't want in. So that is what I have today about protection magic. And just as a reminder, I didn't say it in the beginning, but if you have any questions or concerns or anything that you want to know more about in the just feel free to throw a comment below. Otherwise, that is all I have for protection magic. I am going to be doing a little live sale here very shortly, some special deals just for you folks that are here watching live, as always. But real quick before I do that, I am going to do something that looks like a sign off because I am going to be uploading this video to my YouTube channel for posterity. And I'll use that point as where I cut off the video because nobody wants to watch my live sale on YouTube. They want to just see the good stuff here. So that said, if you were here watching on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Please tune in again next week. I'm very excited. We're launching back into my 20th Century Witchcraft series talking about a journey through the 1970s, which is going to be a blast. I can't wait. So be sure to tune in again next week. So take care and blessed be. All right.